So what happens if that orange guy unalives but of natural causes, doesn't cause it to himself? What happens to the cult then? There's a couple ways this can go. I'm Daniela, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, and the author of Uncultured, about growing up in the Children of God, going into the U.S. Army. You can get autographed copies attached here. So whenever a cult leader leaves the scene, goes on their space travel, remember cults always promise space travel, promising you something in another life, in another realm, in another body, in another state. And then we have the Space Force. So if he goes on his own, one of two things usually happens. Either they've already selected their predecessor and like blessed them and brought them in onto the things. And I just don't see Trump doing that. Like, we don't see him having a close second. Someone mentioned maybe Barron could be the one that takes over, and like, I don't know. We haven't seen that kid very much, so who knows what could happen. But usually what happens if the cult leader leaves the scene and there's no succession plan in place, then usually you see some infighting and breaking off. We saw this even with the Mormons, right? Who was going to take over after Joseph Smith. And there was all these little breakaway cults and groups because they couldn't agree on the leader. On the flip side, with Children of God that I grew up in, we see a very successful transfer of power. And, you know, he was worried about it because one of the things he told his wife, his consort, was just keep acting as though I'm still alive. Like, he'd been living in hiding for decades. Nobody was used to seeing him anyway. In the book When the World Didn't End by Guinevere Turner, that is what the woman does. She just doesn't let anybody know that the main cult leader had already gone, and she keeps acting as though, you know, stuff is coming from him, but really she's the leader. What I think is the most likely to happen is that this election is going to kind of put an end to MAGA, as it were, but kind of. Because, you know, we know he's not coming back in 4 more years. He'll just be too old and probably have lost momentum. But I expect someone else, better and smarter and better looking and more charming and all of those things we associate with charisma that are different from charismatic authority and charismatic leadership. So I expect another leader who is more popular and better looking and more well-spoken and all the sort of charming, charismatic things that we think of that's different from charismatic leadership, to come along and use his playbook, because he did a very crude version of the cult leader playbook. And I expect someone to come along and do it with much more polish. And, you know, they can see how ready the Republican Party is to cult. So if the guy in charge now loses his control, I don't think it will pass over smoothly, but I do think we'll see other people at least attempt it.